Well, as a Jeremy Sochan optimist, enthusiast, believer, whatever you want to say, this kind of sucks. This really does suck. Whatever you want to call it. I mean, this fall off is very weird, very interesting, whatever you want to say. And in a game last night where the Spurs defeated the Lakers 136 to 108 and were up by 1 point, 41 points against this shorthanded Lakers team without Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves. You figured in that fourth quarter that Jeremy Sochan might be able to get some minutes, but no. Carter Bryant got more minutes, Jordan McLaughlin got minutes, even Bismack Biyombo got minutes. And after that game, everyone started wondering why Jeremy Sochan couldn't even crack the rotation. And not even 24 hours after that game, he has now been released and free to go wherever he wants to join a playoff contender or just go somewhere he could maybe just find a role and get more minutes. And I really think this whole thing has been interesting because, in my opinion, there's two sides to this story. I feel like Jeremy Sochan was never really put in a position to succeed, but it also at the same time, could there have been something happening behind closed doors in the Spurs organization that no one knows about? Sochan was the Spurs' first top 10 pick since Tim Duncan. After they drafted him first overall, they literally didn't have a top 10 pick until Jeremy Sochan in the 2022 NBA draft, and I thought he was drafted to be an asset for DeJounte Murray. This was right after DeJounte Murray had an all-star season. He was averaging nearly a triple-double, but then shortly after Sochan was drafted, DeJounte was traded to the Atlanta Hawks in a trade that the Spurs are still reaping the rewards from. And in Sochan's exciting rookie season, I feel like he averaged 11 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 2.5 assists on 45.3% shooting in just 26 minutes of action on a tanking Spurs team. He had a really good season, had a handful of great performances. The one I specifically remember was against Phoenix when he hit a game winner on the Kevin Durant Phoenix Suns. I remember that and think he had like 30 something points that game. That was one of those performances that I watched. I was like, Jeremy Sochan is going to be a vital part for the future of this franchise. But he was shining on a tanking team that went 22-60. And we knew the Spurs were going to be tanking because next season they drafted Victor Wembanyama first overall. And when Wemby was drafted, I felt like Sochan and Wemby really started just feeding off each other defensively. They were a force to be reckoned with as Sochan started emerging as one of the better perimeter defenders in basketball, and Victor Wembanyama was Victor Wembanyama. Like, he was leading the league in blocks, whatever you want to say. Like, the point is, these two were awesome on defense, and on offense, they really had a good chemistry. It felt like they were always on the same page. They knew where they were at all times. I really feel like Wemby fed off Sochan's ability to navigate the cutting lanes, score off ball. That was something they really just clicked on, and I felt like their chemistry was kind of stronger than anything else on the team that we had at that time. And I was really excited to see what this duo could bring for years to come, and especially defensively. As I said, like, Sochan was an amazing perimeter defender, and Wemby was going to start emerging as the best shot blocker in basketball. In Wemby's first season, Sochan gets things a little out of touch because starting that season, Coach Greg Popovich started the season with Jeremy Sochan at point guard. And that was something that was kind of talked about between fans in the offseason, whether or not you wanted to start moving towards this positionless basketball thing. And they did. That starting lineup consisted of Sochan, Vassell, Wembanyama, Zach Collins. I can't remember who was at the 3 for some reason. I'm not sure why that's blanking right now. Point is, Jeremy Sochan starting at point guard, and Greg Popovich wants to start moving towards this positionless basketball era where they're just going to play tall, play big, and they're going to have a bunch of, just going to capitalize on their size. But it didn't work. The point guard experiment just didn't work. That's one of the most controversial things that Spurs fans talk about, and we all hate it. Like, don't like, it's just kind of like, don't bring up the Sochan point guard experience. Like Fight Club. Like, you don't talk about Fight Club. We don't talk about the Jeremy Sochan point guard experience because it was bad. The offense had minimal success. It wasn't flowing. Things just weren't working. They weren't. Things were not going well, and that is really, I think, it tanked Jeremy Sochan's confidence. But Greg Popovich had a vision with Jeremy Sochan. He wanted the kid to learn how to handle the ball, how to want to take care of it, how to become a playmaker. Greg Popovich wanted to push players out of their comfort zones. I mean, when it's the greatest coach of all time, like, you kind of trust it and you go with it. And you see what Greg Popovich sees. But it just wasn't working. It wasn't. It was almost as if, somebody was trying to play point guard who had never played point guard in their life. I understand positionless basketball. It's 2026. The game of basketball has evolved, and you've got to evolve with it. But that Sochan experiment just didn't work, and it went on way longer than it needed to. And I don't think it's because the kid didn't have a will to learn, because he did. I remember when Pop told him in his rookie season to start shooting free throws one-handed because he was struggling to shoot the ball. Everyone clowned on him for it, but you know what? It worked. Shooting free throws one-handed, it started removing that hitch from his jumper. His percentages across the board, they went up. The kid had the willingness to learn. And doing that one-handed free throw thing really told me that he was open and he could be coachable. From year 1 to year 2, his stats took small leaps, not really anything significant, but he also spent half the season playing point guard. And more importantly, his three-point percentage took a small leap from 24.6% to 30.8%, because that was something that was really questioned, as whether or not Jeremy Sochan could evolve and shoot the three. Because in this NBA, you have to be able to shoot threes or you're not going to survive in this league. The league lives and dies by it. You have to live and die by it as well. In year 3, this is Wemby's second season. Sochan doesn't really take any huge strides offensively, but he doesn't really necessarily get worse at all. He doesn't get worse, doesn't really get better, but that's because his role was starting to become more clear, at least to me. His role was starting to emerge as an off-ball scorer by navigating cutting lanes. His role was emerging as an aggressive rebounder, a pesky point of attack defender, who was becoming not just a good perimeter point of attack defender, but one of the best point of attack defenders, and he was an instigator. He was someone who just got in the other team's head. So going into this season, in Jeremy Sochan's third year, Pop has his stroke. Still can't get over that. Still never sits right with me that this was how it ended for the greatest coach of all time. Mitch Johnson becomes the interim head coach, and nothing really changes with Jeremy Sochan's role because Mitch Johnson is going off what of Greg Popovich's vision was. Jeremy still saw 25.8 minutes per game, but yet he was still pushed out of his comfort zone because of a move that the Spurs made at the trade deadline by acquiring De'Aaron Fox from the Sacramento Kings. This was a move that I was extremely ecstatic about, and it felt like this was one of, if not like one of the final pieces that the Spurs were ready to start building a contending team. This was my sign that, all right, here we go. Spurs got an all-star caliber point guard who wanted to come play with Wemby. I was like, all right, let's go. It's time to start putting a team together around Wemby. And so Fox comes to San Antonio, but as a part of that deal, the Spurs ship off their only backup center in Zach Collins to the Chicago Bulls as a part of this 3-team trade that sent Zach LaVine to the Sacramento Kings. Now, the Spurs get a few games of this new Fox-Wembanyama duo, and everyone's trying to see how this is going to work, but it doesn't last long because Wembanyama starts getting sick, and turns out he's got that season-ending deep vein thrombosis blood clot. Well, that sucks. And that injury was basically the nail in the coffin for the Spurs because when Fox came to San Antonio, he was dealing with a damaged shooting hand, and the Spurs knew that he was dealing with that in his pinky finger when they traded for him. But when Wemby went down, that was kind of the sign of like, all right, let Fox get surgery on this finger, start tanking. Like, season's over, our two best players are out, let's just move on, get everyone healthy, and lock and load for next season. But after Victor went down, the Spurs didn't have a center. And so Jeremy Sochan was called on to play center. For someone who is 6'8", playing center went pretty much about as bad as you'd expect it to. And that's just not his fault. He's not a center. He's a power forward. So Bismack Biyombo was brought in to play some center minutes for the Spurs, and it helped. It really did. So, close on the rest of the season. Fox gets his surgery, and then you tank. So the summer of 2025, big things are expected out of the Spurs. They traded for De'Aaron Fox. They needed a backup center. They got the number 2 overall pick in the NBA draft. And people were low-key expecting them to trade for Giannis. I did at times. But then they moved on to Dylan Harper, and I love that. I'm very excited for what that kid has to bring. But the biggest domino of that offseason was Kevin Durant. Where was KD going? Because Phoenix was just not working. And so KD was ready to leave again after forming a super team so he could go try and win a championship. And it was very well known that the Spurs and Rockets were his two desired destinations. He wanted to go to one of those teams, and it felt like the Spurs kind of had the edge. And I thought it makes sense for San Antonio to do this. But it didn't seem like they were willing to give up Jeremy Sochan. And while Spurs beat writer Don Harris, who was arguably the leading local Spurs reporter, said that the Spurs were trying to move Jeremy Sochan in the offseason, they just didn't want to move him in a deal for Kevin Durant. So the Spurs pass on KD, Houston gets him, and now we're going into a season where it's time for Jeremy Sochan to take this leap. And there was chatter about it. Workout videos were showing that he had maybe taken a leap in terms of his shooting. The hitch was gone. He was shooting with two hands from the free throw line again. I mean, things like it finally was going to take a turn for Jeremy Sochan, and adding a three-pointer was finally going to be the missing piece to his game that made him a vital part of the Spurs team for the rest of the future. And in limited minutes, he looked solid. He missed the first few games of the season and then made his debut at the Lakers in Game 6, or it was Game 7. And he just looked like Jeremy Sochan, but with confidence. With confidence from beyond the arc. Teams were giving him some space, and he was shooting it with confidence. Yes, they weren't going down all the time, but you wanted Jeremy to be shooting with confidence. The shot looked so much better in game time reps. It looked like there had been some improvement in the offseason to focus on improving shooting the basketball. But he then starts losing his minutes. Harrison Barnes is getting a lot of minutes. Julian Champagnie's getting a lot of minutes because he's emerged as one of the better three-point shooters in the league. Keldon Johnson is obviously getting a lot of minutes because he's been around for so long, and he's a six-man of the year candidate. And then things start saying, oh, maybe Jeremy might get traded. And you wonder what they're going to do with him as the trade deadline approaches. He still gets limited minutes every now and then, and he looks good. He looked solid. He was a spark plug, an energy guy. He came in and he did play hard. Yes, he had foul trouble at times, but he was pesky. He got in teams' heads. He was doing what he had always been doing, except now he was just shooting more confidently from three-point distance. It looked like there was finally that leap. But as the trade deadline approached, people were saying that he had been granted permission to seek a trade. But the Spurs also didn't want to give him up for Gershon Yabusele from the New York Knicks. They didn't want to do a direct swap. And so Jeremy Sochan survives. And everyone starts wondering what is going to happen with Jeremy Sochan. If they didn't trade him, and they're not going to release him as soon as the buyout market, starts becoming an option for teams, what are they going to do with him? Still doesn't get minutes. And then last night, after the Spurs crushed the short-handed Lakers, Spurs head coach Mitch Johnson says that Jeremy's role has not changed and that it's just been merely a coaching decision for Jeremy to not be in the rotation. But Mitch is happy to see that Sochan was remaining competitive and a positive piece in the locker room. He was seeing Jeremy put in work. Jeremy was always on the bench, hyping up teammates, being a positive atmosphere. And that's maturity. That's really the only thing you can do at that moment is, yeah, it sucks. Your minutes are cut. You're not in the rotation as an NBA player, considering you were just last season. But guess what? You're still going to remain positive and be a positive force in the locker room. But the point is that Mitch Johnson said his role hadn't changed and that he just wanted to see Jeremy continue to work at it. And then he's released. Just weird. A really weird overall situation. And I have to wonder, was there some off-the-court antics that the Spurs didn't like? That Mitch and the organization were like, dude, you've got to knock this off. And he was punished for it. You got to hold players accountable? And maybe that's just what was happening. Was Jeremy Sochan just unplayable because they didn't know what he was going to do in terms of how he was going to grow offensively, even though it looked like there had been a leap taken? How did he go from 26 minutes per game to just completely out of the rotation? Was Mitch Johnson embracing what his vision was for the team? Because I believe Greg Popovich saw what Jeremy Sochan could be. There's a reason that he was selected 9th overall, and there was a reason why Pop kind of tinkered with him. Greg Popovich saw a vision of this team with Jeremy Sochan in the mix, but was that something Mitch Johnson just didn't see? It's not Greg Popovich's team anymore. It's Mitch's. But I think one of the big reasons why Sochan is now so expendable is because of Carter Bryant. Selected 14th overall this draft. Kid's going to be a star. I mean, these last 4 games, he's averaging 10 points, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 assists. He is really starting to come into his own. He's a freak athlete, an amazing defender, has a strong motor. Just things you can't teach. You like guys who are coachable and do the things that you can't teach. Carter Bryant does those things. And he's putting in work. Kid has all the tangibles to be one of the best two-way players, maybe not just on the team, but in basketball. And he said the other day that he used to watch a lot of Kawhi Leonard highlights growing up. Well, guess what? You can be this next Kawhi Leonard, Carter Bryant. You really can be. I am very excited for what the Spurs have in Carter Bryant, and I really think he can be a big part of this team for quite some time. I really think the kid's going to be special. And with his emergence over this last few games, why would you give Jeremy Sochan more minutes than Carter Bryant? Just why? He's clearly becoming a better part of this team than people expected him to be in his rookie season. At least for me. I really expected Carter to spend a lot of time in the G League. But he's starting to come into his own. So the question, once again, why would you give Jeremy Sochan minutes when Carter Bryant is clearly starting to emerge in a role that the Spurs needed Jeremy Sochan to really emerge in? Carter Bryant is right now what Jeremy Sochan needed to be. It's what the Spurs needed Jeremy Sochan to be. And now that Carter Bryant is becoming it, they saw that Sochan became more expendable. I just wish nothing but the best for Jeremy Sochan. I think it was best. Some players just deserve a fresh start, and I think that's really what Sochan needed. And so it's time to move on. I will always be grateful for what he's done, and he's given us some really iconic moments, including the F. Houston quote a little while back. I really wanted it to work out for him. It's just unfortunate. It's been confusing to me, and I really wish he had a chance to shine. And it's going to really suck if he goes somewhere and he becomes an integral part of a team. Because that says a lot about how Mitch Johnson might evaluate talent. But we'll see. We'll see. Right now at this point, the Spurs now have an open roster spot. So is there someone on the buyout market that they're looking to get? They didn't do anything at the trade deadline, so now we see what happens. Could they go bring back Chris Paul for a deep run? And not really just to use him, not to play him, but to be a coach, to be a player coach. To coach Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper through the mistakes. To coach Victor Wembanyama through the mistakes. That's why they brought him in last season, so why not bring him back? Obviously, the Spurs guard rotation is so deep, you're not going to bring back Chris Paul to play him. But you're just going to have him there and give him a chance to maybe win a ring. At this point, no one knows, but there's a lot of tangibles that went into this whole Jeremy Sochan thing, and now we'll see how it plays out. But I'm just, like I said, I just wish nothing but the best for the kid. So, thank you guys for watching. If you guys did enjoy, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're not already. Make sure you hit that post notification bell so you never miss when I upload a video here on Tide Talk Sports. Make sure you go follow my new Twitter. I'll leave the link to that in the description. And until next time, this is Tide Talk Sports signing off, and I will see you all next time.